Guy Ritchie is one of those directors you can recognize in 5 seconds. Fast cuts, weird humor, criminals talking like philosophers, philosophers talking like criminals. His early movies were low budget and stylish. Critics liked them, audiences liked them, and most importantly, the movies actually made money, which in Hollywood is the only love language that matters. Then Madonna entered the chat, and Ritchie completely lost the plot. He married Madonna and suddenly decided he wanted to make a serious survival drama about rich people suffering on a deserted island. In 2002, he released Swept Away, starring Madonna herself, because apparently that seemed like a good idea at the time. The movie was so bad that people still argue who actually directed it, Ritchie or Madonna. Nobody liked it, nobody watched it, and it became his first real box office disaster. After that, he somehow managed to make 2 more flops in a row, just to make sure the downfall wasn't a coincidence. The audience tried very hard to forget the whole Madonna survival experience ever happened, but critics didn't forget. Critics started treating Ritchie like the guy who used to be cool but now shows up to the party, wearing sunglasses indoors and talking about his spiritual journey. Then Sherlock Holmes happened, and somehow everything worked again. The movie was a huge hit, made a ton of money worldwide, and suddenly Guy Ritchie was back in business. Warner Brothers signed him for 3 movies, the first one being Sherlock Holmes 2, which also did well. And then Hollywood did what Hollywood always does. They gave him more money. A lot more money. And that's where things started going wrong again. One of those wrong turns became King Arthur: Legend of the Sword, a movie that was cursed from the very beginning. Originally, Warner wanted to make a remake of the 1981 fantasy film Excalibur. That movie actually did pretty well back in the day, and even picked up an award at Cannes, which is always a nice way to convince a studio that remaking something is a brilliant idea. The remake was supposed to be directed by Bryan Singer, who at the time was known as the guy behind the first 2 X-Men movies. These days, he's better known for, let's say, very questionable parties. But back then, none of that was public yet, so the studio really wanted him. The script was written, casting started, and everything looked normal until 2013 happened. Singer released Jack the Giant Slayer, and the movie crashed so hard that the studio probably felt the shockwave in another building. The flop was loud, expensive, and embarrassing enough for Warner to panic and decide that maybe giving him another giant fantasy movie wasn't the safest idea. So they scrapped the remake and decided to start over with a new King Arthur movie. David Dobkin, the director of Wedding Crashers, was hired. Perfect choice for a medieval epic, obviously. Kit Harington and Joel Kinnaman were cast in the lead roles, and at that point, the studio started looking at the numbers, looking at the cast, looking back at the numbers, and getting very nervous. Big budget, not exactly superstar actors, always a great combination. Warner tried to replace Harington with Colin Farrell and Kinnaman with Gary Oldman, because when a movie starts feeling risky, the first instinct in Hollywood is always to throw older actors at it and hope nobody notices. While negotiations were going on, someone at the studio finally read the script, apparently for the first time, and the reaction was something like, "This is bad, like expensive bad." The script was rushed into rewrites. Dobkin got annoyed, actors got replaced, everything started falling apart, and Dobkin decided that this was the perfect moment to leave the project and go work with Robert Downey Jr. on The Judge. No director, no actors, no script anyone liked. The project was basically dead. And then Guy Ritchie showed up. He walked into Warner with a pitch that sounded like this. What if Lord of the Rings met Snatch? Fantasy epic, but with street criminals and British accents and fast editing. For some reason, the studio loved it, probably because nobody in Hollywood can resist the words cinematic universe. Ritchie got full control. He picked the actors, he picked the composer, he rewrote the script, he chose the locations, he approved the budget, and that budget was supposed to be around $120 million. Guy Ritchie looked at that number and said, "Yeah, that's cute. Let's build a city." Instead of using studio sets, he built a whole medieval town with caves, a harbor, a castle, everything. Because of course he did. Directors love spending other people's money. For the lead role, he chose Charlie Hunnam over Henry Cavill. According to Ritchie, Cavill looked too noble, too aristocratic. Hunnam looked more like a guy you'd grab a beer with. Cavill looked like he owned the kingdom. Ritchie wanted a bro, not a prince. Filming lasted 4 months all over the UK. Everyone had a great time. The budget went over 150 million, and the first cut of the movie was 3.5 hours long. Always a fantastic sign. Test screenings went exactly how you think they went. People were bored, people were confused, people were tired. And according to rumors, the last third of the movie was basically unwatchable. The studio ordered reshoots, cuts, rewrites, a new ending, everything. The budget went up to 175 million, and the movie suddenly got a giant snake, magic nonsense, and a samurai-style fight on a green screen. Because when a fantasy movie isn't working, the solution is always more CGI. Originally, there was no Darklands trip, no weird finale, just a bunch of hints about future movies. Because of course they planned a universe. Sequels, prequels, spin-offs, probably toys, probably games, probably theme park rides. 5 movies were planned before the first one even worked. Classic Hollywood logic. After all the reshoots, edits, and test screenings, the audience still didn't care. Not hate, not love, just nothing. And nothing is the worst possible reaction. Warner basically gave up, cut the marketing budget, and released the movie 1 week after Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Brilliant strategy. Release your giant fantasy epic right after Marvel drops a hit. What could possibly go wrong? In the US, the movie made $39 million on a $175 million budget. Worldwide added about 110. It even lost to a comedy with a rating of around 4 out of 10. That's when you know things went really bad. Analysts estimated Warner lost somewhere between $130 and $150 million on this thing, making King Arthur the biggest flop of the year. All plans for the cinematic universe died instantly. Merlin wasn't even in the first movie because they were saving him for later. There was no later. After 2 flops in a row, Guy Ritchie suddenly signed on to direct Disney's Aladdin. And when a director goes from gangster movies to Disney musicals, you know the career just hit the emergency landing button. It's actually a little sad. King Arthur isn't perfect, it's messy, it's weird, it's overstuffed, but it has style, it has energy, it has personality. And in a world full of safe, boring blockbusters, this one at least tried something. That was Frame Back. Subscribe for more rewinds and see you on the next one.